Maybe you've seen this drone at least once, the MQ-25 Stingray? Well, there are some fresh updates about it. On April 25th, Boeing and the US Navy successfully completed a very important flight for the development of this platform. The mission lasted about 2 hours, and during this time the aircraft performed several maneuvers and checks to validate its basic flight systems. Please note that this is not a fully autonomous aircraft and still requires ground support. In fact, the connections with the ground control station were tested. This event represents a key step toward the actual deployment of the drone on aircraft carriers. A scenario so far limited to demonstrations and prototypes, which are probably the ones you've seen until now. The path is trickier than it appears, so we'll proceed step by step. Let's take a step back because the path, as mentioned, that led to the current configuration of the Stingray has been marked by several changes. I'll simplify it for you, but the US fleet's interest in a carrier-based drone dates back to 2006 when the U-Class program was launched. Originally, the project called for a low observability aircraft, or stealth for short, capable of penetrating enemy air defenses and carrying out attack missions. In 2012, the requirements were changed, steering the system toward reconnaissance missions. As is often the case with US programs, 4 years later, in 2016, there was another change of direction, with the fleet deciding to focus on a platform with primary aerial refueling capability while retaining only secondary reconnaissance and attack functions. The MQ-25A, as you've probably gathered, is therefore designed as an unmanned tanker for carrier operations, a very important role in operational areas, for what is essentially a solution that allows a country like the United States to operate with a floating airport in crisis areas. And I know that aircraft carriers are a topic that comes up cyclically, but as the war in the Middle East highlights, land bases by their nature are static and can therefore be hit, leading to the loss of personnel and very expensive aircraft. Countries like Iran are able to strike distant areas by coordinating attacks thanks to intelligence provided by other countries, third-party countries or companies that provide up-to-date satellite data. That's why an aircraft carrier is still a valid solution today for moving aircraft and power projection capability into conflict areas. However, it must be said that there are, and there will increasingly be, threats such as hypersonic missiles, anti-ship missiles, or swarm attacks by drones, which will make life increasingly difficult for aircraft carrier strike groups. Now, excuse the digression, let's get back to the drone. Keep in mind that once it's integrated into the embarked air component, it will be among the largest aircraft present on the flight deck. We're talking about a wingspan that reaches almost 23 meters while with folded wings, which is essential for aircraft operating on aircraft carriers or LHDs. It goes down to 9.5 meters, making it less bulky. The overall length is 15.5 meters, while the speed, I'll be honest, I couldn't find any official data. But it should be a subsonic aircraft, while still meeting, of course, the needs of the jets it will have to refuel. Anyway, we're talking about a single-engine aircraft. The engine will be a Rolls-Royce. And today's sources talk about dimensions as far as the aircraft is concerned, just to give you a simple comparison similar to those of the Northrop Grumman E-2D Hawkeye. These days mark the first flight for the US fleet, but the T-1 prototype developed by Boeing made its first flight in 2001. It has accumulated about 125 flight hours. This experience has directly contributed to the development of the current model, which is being tested by the fleet right now. So, I told you that the drone will play a fundamental role, but let me give you a practical fact. Currently, the fleet uses the system called Buddy. In this system, fighters like the Super Hornet are used to refuel other aircraft in flight, as you can see from these images. This method involves direct use. A combat asset is used for a logistical support function, reducing operational availability for offensive missions. The introduction of the MQ-25A changes this balance. The drone is designed to take on the role of aerial tanker, freeing up the fighters from this task. However, as I often say, not everything that glitters is gold. Before continuing, I remind you that if you like the work we do every week, you can support us in a very simple way. Leave a like, share this video on your social media, and at the end of the video let us know what you think about this drone. If you're particularly interested in supporting us, consider a subscription, like buying us a coffee a month to improve the technical quality. Thank you very much. I told you that not everything that glitters is gold. Despite progress in testing, the program has experienced some delays. According to the fleet's budget documents, initial operational capability will not be reached before 2021. Previously, an early deployment was planned with the first drones intended for the Roosevelt aircraft carrier. According to today's sources, the definition of initial operational capability requires the availability of 3 aircraft, trained personnel, and adequate infrastructure to operate from a compatible aircraft carrier. The overall program currently includes 76 units planned, including engineering development models and units dedicated to testing. The current budget includes the purchase of 3 aircraft, however, for a total value of $771 million. After the successful first flight with the U.S. Navy, activities will continue with further tests, with the goal of continuing the validation of flight systems and operational capabilities. Subsequently, the drone will be transferred to a naval air base in Maryland. Here, the necessary procedures will begin to obtain certification for use on aircraft carriers. I'll conclude with the MQ. The MQ-25A is considered the first step toward a broader evolution of unmanned naval aviation, and the U.S. Navy sees it as the basis for the development of further autonomous systems. Something we know the U.S. Navy and others are pursuing. Among the future prospects is the possibility of employing unmanned aircraft in direct collaboration with manned planes, as you know, such as the F-A-18 and the F-35. I also recall a small detail we saw a few weeks ago in the video about the future tiltrotor aircraft of the United States. In fact, in the renderings shown by the company, you could see an MQ-25 refueling the future Cheyenne II tiltrotor. Before concluding, however, I want to leave you with a provocative thought. Since we often talk about defense here, let me know what kind of application you think this drone could have in the civilian field. I have a few ideas in mind, but let me know yours in the comments. See you soon here on Gens Italia, sources in the first comments as always. Bye!